The Chaos Gods, the Dark Brothers, tire of their great game. Now, they seek to sweep the board clean with fire and blood. For centuries, the Empire has held firm against its enemies. Mankind has encountered no foe that steel could not tame.
Whenever I come down to the nitty-gritty of writing these video game reviews, I often come across a game that I just can't seem to get into, but others can. This was the case with Warhammer End Times Vermintide, a blatant Left 4 Dead clone adapted into the Warhammer universe that to me feels like a game still in early access. It's a first-person shooter combined with hack and slash, developed by Fatshark. Now there is a good concept here, but it's overshadowed by a myriad of problems, and I'm going to spend the next few minutes telling you just what exactly these problems are. This quite simply is not a finished product, and it's false advertising to market it as such. The story itself and the setting is actually pretty damn interesting. Set in the city of Ubershriek, under attack by the rat-like race known as the Skaven. You choose from one of 5 heroes and play through a few missions as you remove the city of infestation. It's a very dark, gothic setting with incredible lighting, a gorgeous art style, great sound and music, and enemy designs. All of the heroes have quite distinct personalities, they're varied in terms of their appearance, and there's lots of great banter between them with some superb voice acting. It feels like there's been a lot of love and attention to detail put into creating them. However, the same cannot be said for the rest of the story, which isn't really as fleshed out or detailed as it could be. Even for people who have a good understanding of the Warhammer universe, I'd think they'd agree the story is pretty much non-existent, which is kind of a shame. Each mission is a well-disguised corridor where you just move through it in a straightforward manner, killing everything you see, and lastly making it to a wagon to escape, hopefully with your entire party still intact. This, alongside with a few other mechanics, is what's been stripped right from the Left 4 Dead games, namely the 4-player limit, the heads-up display, the enemy types, the healing system, through to the way you revive dead players, by rescuing them in each mission. All of the 5 heroes are very distinct visually, but in terms of playing as each of them, they're deceptively the same, with all of them having a very similar melee and ranged weapon. Now, I'll grant you that the ranged weapons are at least somewhat varied, but not all that much that it offers a certain class advantages over another, and they seem to have similar damage output against most mobs anyway. The ranged weapon is generally able to kill the trash mobs in a single hit, whereas the melee weapon could be either 2 or 3 hits for body shots, or a single attack if you target an enemy's head. You can hold down the attack button for a heavy attack, which is kind of hard to use effectively, as being attacked when you're in the middle of this animation resets it. Then there's the special mobs as well, most of which have the ability to incapacitate you unless one of your teammates is able to intervene. Imagine the hunters or the smokers from Left 4 Dead, but far more frequent. And just like in Left 4 Dead, you can mostly expect your teammates to be completely oblivious and just ignore you as you're ripped to shreds. One of the reasons these enemy types are problematic is because they lack a noticeable musical cue or sound effect to let you know when they're around, and most of the time you'll know they're there when they've already messed up your day. There is also a reskinned tank type mob as well, which again just soaks up an insurmountable amount of damage as it runs around and pelts everyone with powerful attacks. Breaking the classes or the heroes down, you've got a witch hunter with a sword and 2 pistols, a waywatcher with a bow and 2 swords, a dwarf with a crossbow and an axe and shield, a wizard with a magic staff and a sword, and lastly an Empire soldier with a blunderbuss and, that's right, a sword. Their configurations can be switched out with the loot you get in the game, but we'll talk about that later on. Regardless of which hero you choose, you're largely just going to be mashing the left mouse button in a futile attempt to keep the absolute droves of Skaven at bay, which spawn erratically and without much sense of pattern or structure. It is quite common and irritating to have several dozen coming at you from one direction, only to suddenly have a couple pop up behind you as well. Vermintide uses a similar combat system to Left 4 Dead, where you can push enemies back to give yourself a bit of breathing room, which is utterly necessary in this game, as enemies will literally clip right through each other as they gang up on you. One big thing I noticed too is that the reach for an enemy's attack seems to be longer than it feels like it should be. Like they may be swinging at you with a weapon that's short in length or just their bare hands, but they'll still hit you when you would think you're out of their reach. As a result of all of this, the ranged combat largely takes a back seat here, save for those moments when you're up against the tougher mobs, and generally mashing the left mouse button is what forms the majority of the gameplay. Outside of the combat, the game uses a loot system where you can earn trinkets and better weapons and gear for each of the classes, though you can only earn this loot when you finish a mission, and it's literally a roll of the dice. It reminds me a bit of the loot system in Payday 2, where you just kind of keep your fingers crossed that you got your hands on something good. But again, like Payday 2, most of the time you won't earn anything all that valuable. And that's even if you manage to finish a mission in the first place. Now, if the entire incentive to keep playing is this upgrading and unlocking system, and it is by design unfulfilling and unrewarding, then we're really up shit creek. This feels like a game I should want to spend 50 hours investing my time in, but I see little reason to do so, and I hardly feel compelled when I get these half-assed rewards after trying a mission 3 or 4 times over. From the screenshots, it looked like a first-person Gauntlet mixed obviously with elements of Left 4 Dead and the great lore and backstory of the Warhammer universe, but it just never sort of goes anywhere and it's trapped in mediocrity, primarily by these unrefined, underdeveloped mechanics that, as I said, are the cornerstone of an early access game, not a supposed full release. The other thing about these types of games that always annoys me is when people defend them by saying something like, oh, you know, the game's a lot better if you play with people you know. And yeah, look, I guess that's a valid point, but it's not really an option for most people. Not everyone in the world has the luxury of 3 close friends all sitting around with their thumbs up their assholes waiting for an invite to a match of Vermintide. I think perhaps the game's biggest blunder is that there's no kind of tutorial or journal system to introduce you to the game's mechanics in a threat-free environment. For the amount of stuff you need to know about, there is literally no information in-game about any of it, at least as far as I could find. I don't think this is a bad game, but it just seems like an unfinished one. Like a roast that's been taken out of the oven too early, this thing needs to be put back in. It's not done yet. But there is a lot of potential here, and the developers are patching the game frequently, so there is light at the end of this tunnel. But in its current state, honestly, Sunny Jims, I just can't recommend it.